This is the ConquerWorry podcast, and my name is Jay Coulter. Our mission is to inspire, educate, and advocate for those who struggle with stress or their mental health. This is your podcast home for inspirational stories and interviews with people who are making a difference in the lives of others.
This episode is sponsored by Jay's new book, predictably called ConquerWorry: How to Build a Simple Daily System to Reduce Stress. Visit ConquerWorry.com or jcoulter.com for more details.
Thanks for downloading this episode of the ConquerWorry podcast. If you are new to our community and you'd like to join our global volunteer network, we would love to have you. Please visit ConquerWorry.org for more details and join our growing community. Joining me today is Kelley McElreath. Listeners of the ConquerWorry podcast love stories of someone who's gone through a struggle in their life, be it with extreme stress or a mental health challenge, found a way to get through and come out and tell their story and their systems for dealing with those issues. Kelley is no exception. I think you're really going to appreciate her struggle and her survival story. Kelley, thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you for having me, Jay.
Kelley, let's just get right to it. And I want this to be a conversation between you and I because you have quite a backstory. Let's start with your youth. Tell us a little bit about some of the challenges you had to deal with as a young girl.
Well, my parents got divorced when I was about four, so I was really young, and my father was never around and did not help us. So she basically had to work two jobs, most of my school years anyway, and so I was a latchkey kid. And we lived in Texas, and her family lived in Oklahoma. So we would go, every 3 or 4 times a year to go visit them. And it was to visit them, but also it was to get food to help us because we were always poor. So when we were there on these occasions, not only were we struggling to eat, and it's embarrassing, you didn't really want, especially as a kid, for all your cousins and everybody to know you're there at your grandparents' house so you can be fed. And during that time, a relative started molesting me, and I could just...
How old were you at that time?
At that time, I was probably 7 or 8, I believe.
Okay.
So I could see pain in my mom's eyes. Ever since they got divorced, I was too little to understand it, but I knew she was working so hard to take care of us, and I just couldn't bear, to tell her now, not only is she going through all that, but this was happening to me. And so I kept it a secret, and then that whole instance caused me to have a lifetime of not trusting people that I thought I could trust.
That's a lot for a 7 or 8-year-old to carry around. Looking back, how did you do it?
Well, honestly, I guess that's how I started coping with things in an inappropriate way. As a kid, in that moment, that was probably my very first, I would say, primal wound. I learned how to compartmentalize stuff. So I compartmentalized it, and I would tell myself, now that you mention it, looking back, this is only 3 or 4 times a year. It could be every day. I don't have to see this person all the time. As I got older, there were times I just didn't want to go or didn't have to go, things like that, or work out some way where I didn't have to stay the night with her, things like that. So that's just how I dealt with it. I had no other choice.
Yeah, I guess that makes sense, right? There was nothing else you could do.
Right.
So as you move through your early youth and you get into your teenage years, tell us a little bit about what life was like in your house with your mom. Obviously, you have an absentee dad at this point. It's you and your mom struggling, and then you hit the wonderful teenage years.
Yes. Well, like I said, mom was gone all the time, and I absolutely hated school because I was bullied, my entire life as growing up in school. Always bullied, made fun of because people could tell we were poor. I hated school so bad. So when I was 15, I started working. All I saw my mom do was work, and I thought, I don't want a man to have to take care of me, and I want to work, and that's what I did. And I loved working. I loved making my own money and everything.
Kelley, what'd you do?
I worked at a fast food restaurant.
Okay, excellent. And hey, Kelley, I'm hearing a little bit of a tapping noise. If there's something tapping on your end, it might help the sound quality over here.
Okay.
So you're working fast food as a teenager, going through the teenage hormones, carrying this burden that had been, well, following you around since you were 7 or 8 years old. So what does a teenage girl do except find a boyfriend, right?
Right. That's exactly what I did. I mean, when I went to work at that restaurant, all kinds of guys were giving me attention that I had never had before. And so there were older guys, all of the older guys, flirting with me and giving me the attention that I never received from my dad. And looking back, I was starving for a man to love me. And so I met a boy, and he was the first person I had ever had sex with. And about 2 months into it, I got pregnant.
Mm-hmm. Tell us about it.
Well, back in that day, it was in the 80s. I think in my mind, the right thing to do was to get married. So I had actually broke up with him knowing he was not good for me. And then I found out I was pregnant. So we got back together and got married. And the baby ended up coming 12 weeks early, was premature, was in intensive care, on life support, all of that. And luckily, he was okay. We brought him home when he was 2 weeks old. And he was just such a sweetheart, great, great baby. And when he was 4 months old, he passed away from sudden infant death syndrome.
I mean, just that incident alone could be very trying on an individual, not to mention what you went through in your youth with being molested. And that's not really the end of the story. But I can tell you, just to add from some of my own personal experience, my wife Chris and I's daughter was born premature. We're fortunate she's fine today, but I know how stressful that period is from the day they're born until the day they come home. And that's only my limited experience. Put on top of that the struggle you had to deal with your child passing. Tell me, looking back now, how did you process that at such a young age?
I think because of living in poverty, being bullied my whole life, being molested, a combination of those type of things that happen, unfortunately, to people that live in poverty. At that time, looking back, it was almost like I was walking like a zombie. I didn't even cry when my son died. I was at the funeral, I didn't cry, and so I didn't know what to do, and nobody knew what do you tell somebody? What do you tell a 17-year-old girl that's lost a child? There's nothing you can say to make it better. So actually, on the day of his funeral, I was offered to smoke crack and was told it would help me. And I did, and it did help me that one day. But then I spent the next 6 years trying to find that high again, and I never could. But it did its job, which was make me completely not have to deal with the fact that I had actually lost a child at so young of an age.
So from age 17 then till about, 25?
23, yeah.
I'm sorry, 23? Okay,
Mm-hmm.
You're a crack addict.
Yes.
Tell us about that period of your life.
Well, it didn't take me long. So I started doing that, and then my ex-husband, he, being a man, or who he was, he just immediately cried and worked through it all himself in his way. But once he was done, he was done. So when it was my turn and I finally started breaking down over it, he was not there for me. So we butted heads, and it was not going to work out. So we got divorced. And the only way that I could support my habit, I did have a daytime job. I worked in a salon. But the only way I could support my habit and pay my bills at the same time was to start stripping. So I became a stripper, and I worked all day at the salon, worked at night every night, sometimes 7 days a week at the strip clubs, and supported my habit that way.
At what age was this?
I had just turned 18 when I started.
Okay, and how long did you dance?
Until I was 23.
23. Okay, so 5 years dancing.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, now there has to be ramifications from that as well on your mental health.
Oh my gosh, yes. Yes.
Tell us about it.
Even though my mom worked 2 jobs the whole time, she was such a great mom, and she always told me not to do drugs. I mean, she didn't really tell me why, but she said they were bad for you, it could ruin your life, those kinds of things. So I knew better than what I was doing. I knew I shouldn't be doing that. So there were countless times where I would be out of money, out of drugs, and the sun would be coming up. I had been up all night long. And it was in those moments that every time I thought to myself, why? Why are you doing this to yourself? And I don't think at that age I really realized that it was to cover up pain. But it was working. But I knew, of course, when I was at that situation, seeing the sun come up and I have nothing left to numb my pain. And I just thought, I know better than to do this. I'm a better person than this. Why? What can I do to get out of this? And every single time, for whatever reason, the thought would cross my mind briefly, because I didn't want to ponder on it too long, that if my mom died, it would definitely hit me right in the gut, and I would know I could not do drugs. And so when I was 21, she was diagnosed with breast cancer. And then by the time I was 23, she had passed away. Needless to say, I was in such shock. I felt like I was being punished, like I had brought this on myself. It was everything I deserved. And I went and saw her in the funeral home, the exact place where my son had been buried. And I saw her, and she did not look like a cancer patient at all. She was just gorgeous. She looked like she was at so much peace. She looked so pretty. She was in a really pretty white dress. And I touched her chest, and I said, I promise you, I will never again in my life touch drugs. And that was when I was 23, and I'm about to turn 47, and I have not touched drugs.
Did you go through any counseling to help you stop using drugs?
I did not. I went through detox and everything all by myself.
So you just made the decision to stop smoking crack and stopped.
Yes, I actually stopped smoking cigarettes. I was smoking 3 packs of cigarettes a day and stopped doing drugs all at the same time.
That is an amazing amount of willpower.
Yes, that's actually on down in the story. What got me through is the more things I went through like that, the more I realized there was something neat, something unique within me.
So let's talk about, I've never looked for this, but I've never heard of anybody just stopping crack on a dime. Have you?
No, I haven't. Now that I think about it, no. But here's the deal. If I have, it's been somebody who lost something tragic. Something tragic had happened. So I don't know if that's what takes maybe strong-willed people to snap into reality and get a grip. I'm not really sure.
Kelley, that's fantastic. So you stopped, you detoxed yourself, and then you got married again. You started putting your life back together.
I did. Actually, whenever my mom died, I was 23. It was April. And I actually tried to stop stripping for a couple of months, but it wasn't paying the bills. So I went back to the same job. And mind you, I wasn't going to do drugs, but I'm surrounded by it. So I thought, this is not good for me to be in this place. I just can't do it. I'll have to find a different way. Well, in that little short time that I went back, they had a new manager, and he was working there just while he was looking for a normal job. And we ended up getting together. And of course, every time I went back to work, the dark club seemed so much darker. And I realized this is where I spend my time, with these people doing all kinds of terrible things. I can't stay here. I cannot live my life like this anymore. And now that I wasn't doing drugs, I was seeing so much more clearly. So I told him, I can't do this. I know we've just been together a short time, but I can't work here anymore. And he gave his 2-week notice too. And we found a job, and he found one. I found one right after him, working at the same place. And we got married, and we're supposed to live happily ever after.
But you're not here to tell that story, are you?
No.
All right. Well, let's kind of quickly go through that a little bit. So not to gloss it over, but the marriage had its ups, it had its downs, and then one day you're in the shower. Tell us what happens.
I'm in the shower, and the thought came to my mind that I'm 40, and I had always been told that you should start doing self-exams whenever you're 10 years younger than your mother was diagnosed, so that would put me at 40. And I got some soap, felt my breast and felt something immediately. So I went to go get a mammogram. They didn't see anything, so I did some different kind of mammograms, sonogram. Then they told me I needed a biopsy, and then was diagnosed with malignant breast cancer.
So take us back to that point in time. You find out you have this malignant cancer. How did you process it? And here's what I'm looking for. I'm looking to see if you had the same type of tenacity in your approach as you did to kicking the crack habit, as you did to cancer.
I actually did. Of anything that I've said that I have been through in my entire life, cancer was what I handled the absolute best. I mean, it's the one thing I really, really, really pat myself on the back for and give myself credit for. I had coaching clients during the entire time. I never missed an appointment with my clients. I just kept right on going. I attribute some of this because I was helping other people, and that always makes anybody feel better about their own situation. But I just went full steam ahead, and I did everything I could. I mean, I had chemo and a double mastectomy and all of that, just doing everything to save my life. I knew I had to be positive. I could see people negative, and they were dying. I mean, literally, I hate to say that, but if I saw people that were dying, most likely they were extremely negative. They had no hope whatsoever, and I had to hold on to my own hope that would get me through. I mean, actually, how I started was from the day I was diagnosed, is I started watching every comedian I could get my hands on, every funny movie, America's Funniest Home Videos, all the time, until I got through it.
I love it. I think that attitude has clearly helped you multiple times in your life, and it's a good thing because there's still more to come.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about, without getting into too much of the weeds, but I think it's pertinent to the story and the narrative behind your resilience, is the second marriage and how it ended up falling apart.
Well, when I was fighting cancer, it was all focus on that as far as I was concerned. And so when I had chemo, it made my brain, I'm a type A personality, so it made my brain not work the way that it normally would. So after my last treatment, a few weeks went by, probably 3 or 4 weeks, and my brain started clearing up. And as that happened, I thought something was really off with my husband. And I would ask him about it, and it would always be turned around on me. He would say I'm insecure because I don't have my hair, and my boobs are still not right, and all of those things. And I thought, well, maybe that is true. So every day, that feeling kept getting stronger and stronger and stronger. But he was such a great guy that I knew if I told anyone what was going on, that they would think, oh, it's because you're going through cancer and blah, 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 that they would defend him because he was every man's man. So I decided, you know what? I'm hiring a private investigator. I'm just not going to tell anybody, and I'm going to get it in black and white. If he's not, great. It is just me. But I had a gut feeling what was going on. So I got the private investigator's report, and sure enough, he had been meeting people in another city where he was traveling, going on Craigslist. He was just doing terrible things with not just a couple of women, but many women, and found out that had been going on for a lot of years.
Not easy to take when you were in the mental state that you were in, obviously. No. Tell us how you processed it and how you got through to the other side of that.
Well, I wouldn't say at that time that I did get through it or to the other side of it, because I had gone through cancer. I had not dealt with what had physically happened to me because I had just finished the physical fight. So, like, literally 2 weeks later, he got a job offer that was great in Atlanta. So there we were. I could not divorce him at that time, and how would I take care of the kids? What would I do? So we all went with him. And I really looked at it as, you know what, this is just a sign for me to work this out. So whenever it didn't, and I tried committing suicide, that's when I really started the process of helping myself, getting through it. And honestly, Jay, I think it was at that time where I took a good hard look at what I had been through, because even you tell me I have an amazing story. Everybody does. But when I personally look on it, it doesn't seem like that big of a deal until then, till after I tried to kill myself. Then it was like, okay, wait, I have been through so many things, and have I ever really, really dealt with these things? I need something to help me, and I really think that it's a culmination of all these things that I've told you that led up to that day of me on the floor realizing I can actually do something for myself.
Yeah, and, I don't want to gloss over the suicide, but the reality is you are also a suicide survivor. And for listeners who aren't keeping a tally, I've been doing it for you. Here's the list of things that Kelley has overcome in her life. Grew up poor, short on food, as a latchkey kid with an absentee dad. Besides being bullied, she became a teen bride because she was pregnant. Had her son prematurely, went through that experience, and then lost her son. Became a crack addict, stopped smoking crack on her own, cold turkey. Spent 5 years as a stripper. Learned how to process the ramifications of that. Overcame cancer. Dealt with an adulterous husband and a suicide attempt. So, Kelley, that is quite a story. So, what our listeners would really like to know is how you developed a system or a process, and we know it's not easy, to get yourself out of that place, given everything that you've been through. How did you do it?
Well, it was really difficult. It took me a while to even realize what I was doing, that I was creating a process that other people could do. When I woke up in the hospital, a lot of people think because you woke up, you're just totally fine. Or when your cancer's over, you're totally fine, but you're not. And so whenever I did still have, major depressive issues and episodes, and I was still very suicidal, but I could never put my kids through that again because I saw the collateral damage of my actions. And so it was even worse. It was worse than it was the day I tried to take my life, because I realized I have no options. I have no choice here. I can't commit suicide. I can't overdose. I can't do anything. There's nothing I can do. No counselor or therapist has helped me. What am I going to do? And an incident happened to me, and I was in a suicidal episode, and I was spiraling down really fast. And a friend of mine came over and, against my wishes, and sat at the end of my bed and said nothing and just sat there. So long story short, that was the first time I realized, okay, every person needs a go-to person that they can help, even if they just don't say anything. A lot of people are afraid. I don't know what to say. I don't know what to help my friend that's suicidal. Sometimes the best answer is no answer. So that's kind of where it all got started, as far as me realizing there are ways for me to get help without calling a hotline, without having to make an appointment with a counselor, and things like that. But fast forward, and I had gone through that, 6 months of severe depression still and being suicidal so much of the time, that I had moved from Georgia to Texas, and I was in my apartment by myself, and I was literally sitting in front of my long mirror in my bedroom floor. I'm looking at it right now. And I was bawling my eyes out. I was crying so bad. I felt so alone. I felt like I had just wore my friend out by calling her and depending on her. And, I felt like everybody in the world thought I should be better already. And I just felt alone again. And again, I had no options. And I just sat there looking at myself, my eyes swollen, my face red. I couldn't quit crying, and I just thought, this is the face. If you had a picture of this is the face of suicide. This is the face of depression, of problems, that mental illness, mental health, all of those things. And I don't have anything I can do right now. I cannot run away from myself. And that's what I wanted to do. I thought if I could just leave my brain here and I could run away for just a little bit, I'll be okay. But I couldn't do that, obviously. So the thought hit me, just get up from here. That's the first step you can do, is just at least get up. So I got up, and I thought, I'm going to take a shower. So I went and took a shower, and I had bought this exfoliating scrub recently before that. And as I was scrubbing my arms, I thought, I wonder if I could just imagine, just pretend that every time I scrub my arms, those awful, ugly, dark thoughts are just washing down the drain. So I looked down at the drain and I did what I said. And then I thought, I'm going to put some of this soap stuff on my head. And I literally kind of massaged my head, imagining that all those thoughts were being washed away and cleaned in my brain. And believe it or not, it worked. So I got out of the shower. I felt so much better. I got dressed. I put my makeup on. I fixed my hair. I felt better every time I did some new thing, like fix my hair, I felt better. Makeup, I felt better. I got out of my bedroom, opened my blinds, and thought, I've got to get out of this house. So I got out of the house, went and got me a Diet Coke, came back, and the moment I entered my apartment, I realized I was totally fine. I had been through that, and I did it all by myself.
Okay. So tell me what that led you to believe or do, or what changes did you make as a result of that experience?
Well, after pondering on that and really realizing what I had done, even then I didn't realize how huge it was. But I looked back over the course of my life, because I had suicidal thoughts from a very young age. So I just looked over the course of my life, and I didn't try to take my life till I was 40-something. So I thought to myself, somehow I've kept myself alive for all these years. How did I do it? And I started realizing the different things I did, but what I was doing was, the drugs and alcohol and things like that were wrong. But I've been clean for so many years. I knew there were times where I was doing other things that helped me. So I started to make a list of all those things that I could remember. And I started thinking, okay, I may be out and about and not able to jump in the shower, or not able to, use my little scrub in my arms situation or help or anything like that. So one day I was in my car, and when I got divorced, I made myself a playlist on Spotify called I'm Free. And that particular playlist just makes me feel really strong and really powerful, and like nobody can conquer me, that kind of thing. So I played that playlist, and oh my gosh, just almost instantly I was just pumped up. I was just so excited and thought, what the hell am I even thinking? Why do I let my mind go there? So I created that list that kept getting longer and longer with different tools that I came up with that worked for me. Some worked sometimes, some worked in others. I just had to kind of customize it for me. And so that's when I really thought back to that time of me sitting in the floor looking at myself. And it broke my heart, because I thought, this is literally the face of what I looked like before I tried to take my life. How many other millions of people are in this very same moment, at this very same time, across the world, right here in this moment with me? If we had one last ditch effort, just one person we could call, or one thing we could do for ourselves, then we could save ourselves. And that's when I realized, oh my gosh, this is something that I can customize for each individual, because what works for me may not work for you. But together, we could create something just like I created for myself, and that keeps me alive. And you know what? I rarely have those depressive episodes anymore. Now, I do, but it's not a monthly, bi-monthly, ordeal. And I never think of suicide. I never get suicidal. So I know this works because I'm here living it out every day.
Okay, well, good. Well, tell us, how could listeners find out a little bit more about you, your work, and what you're up to?
The biggest thing is my website to really hear all the details of my story. It's thesurvivorcoach.com. And I'm a life coach, so I do everything over the phone, and love speaking, and I love working with people, mainly people that are depressed, having suicidal episodes or depression episodes. And my Twitter is Survivor Coach 16, and everywhere else on social media is The Survivor Coach. So I can also be reached at thesurvivorcoach@gmail.com. And I have recently had lots of people start emailing me their stories and just asking for, generalized help with their kids, or, whatever it may be. And it's just been really awesome, sad too, but awesome that I'm finally able to share this story and get that out, because whenever I woke up from trying to take my life, I had so much overwhelming guilt and shame that even though I had survived all those other things I told you about, it seemed like that was all null and void now because was a failure. I had failed, I quit, I gave up. So no longer could I be known as a survivor. So doing this and helping people has helped me realize I don't have anything to be shamed about or guilted about anymore. I have to forgive myself and teach others how to do the same thing.
That's great. We'll have links to all those properties in the show notes for this episode. And listeners, as always, if you are struggling with your mental health or you are suicidal, the first step is not this blog, it's not this podcast, it's not the Survivor Coach, it's to seek professional medical help. And then reach out for some secondary resources when you can. Kelley, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
This episode is sponsored by ConquerWorry.org. Please visit ConquerWorry.org and join our growing community.